The bridge of the Ember of Soul was quiet. Captain stood at the main window, watching the stars drift past like scattered diamonds. She was a woman of 47 years, with gray streaks in her black hair and a face marked by old scars. Her hands rested behind her back, and her dark eyes carried the weight of many battles. Behind her, the crew worked at their stations. Screens glowed blue and green. Soft beeps filled the air. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. Then the distress signal came. Lieutenant was the first to notice. He was young, barely 30, with sharp features and nervous hands that never stopped moving. He had joined the fleet 5 years ago after watching his colony burn. They had killed everyone he loved. Now he served on this ship, searching for purpose in the stars. "Captain," he said, his voice tight, "we're receiving an emergency broadcast, Priority 1. Turned slowly, source. Solace Prime." The name hung in the air like smoke. Every human knew Solace Prime. Every human child learned its story before they learned to walk. 300 years ago, when Earth was nothing but ash and memory, the Lyra had opened their world to the survivors. They had given shelter to the broken remains of humanity. They had shared their food, their medicine, their homes. They had asked for nothing in return. The Lyra were gentle creatures. Their skin was pale and slightly transparent, showing the blue veins beneath. They had 3 hearts, and each heart beat with kindness. They had no weapons, no armies, no desire for war. They were healers and poets, artists and dreamers. They believed that compassion was the highest form of strength. And now someone was attacking them. Walked to station and looked at the screen. The message was simple, broadcast in the universal language that all species understood. The words made her blood turn cold. Solace Prime under attack. VORN collective forces. REQSTING immediate assistance. CASUALTIES in the millions, please. Anyone help US. The collective. The same empire that had burned Earth. The same monsters that had hunted humanity across the stars like animals. They had returned, and they were killing the Lyra. "Get me Admiral," said, "now." The connection took only seconds. Admiral appeared on the main screen, her white hair pulled back tight, her uniform decorated with medals from a lifetime of service. She was 73 years old, but her mind was sharp as a blade. She had heard the stories from her grandmother, who had been a child on one of the refugee ships. She knew what the Lyra had done for her people. "I've seen the signal," said before could speak. "I'm ordering the entire fleet to move." "The entire fleet?" asked surprised. "Admiral, that's every ship we have, if we commit everything to this fight." "Then we commit everything," interrupted. Her voice was calm but firm. "The Lyra saved us when no one else would. They gave us hope when we had none. They treated us like family when the galaxy called us vermin. Now they need us." She paused. "We will answer." Across the fleet, the order spread like fire. Hundreds of ships began turning towards Solace Prime. Engines roared to life. Crews prepared for battle. The message was clear. Humanity was going to war. In the engineering section of the Ember of Soul, a woman named Bora heard the announcement. She was small and thin, with oil stains on her clothes and wild hair that she never bothered to fix. She was not a soldier. She was a civilian engineer, a builder of machines and weapons. 5 years ago, she had invented something terrible, something that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. She called it the Cascade Bomb. The weapon worked by creating a chain reaction in enemy ships. One bomb could destroy a single vessel, but the explosion would trigger the fuel cells of nearby ships, causing them to explode as well. The destruction spread like a disease, consuming everything in its path. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was the reason other species called humans. Bora had created the bomb to protect her people. Now she would use it to protect the Lyra. She walked to her workshop and began preparing the weapons. Her hands moved quickly, checking systems, loading charges. She did not smile. There was no joy in this work, but there was purpose. On the bridge gathered her senior officers. Stood beside her, along with the chief medical officer, doctor, and a young pilot named who had just joined the crew. Was only 22, with a round face and wide eyes that still held innocence. This would be his first real battle. "I won't lie to you," said, looking at each of them. "They are powerful, they have more ships than us, they have more weapons. Many of us will die in this fight." She let the words settle. "But I'm asking you to fight anyway, not for glory, not for territory, for something older and simpler than that." She turned to the window, where the stars waited. 300 years ago we were nothing. We were refugees, starving and sick, drifting through space with no home and no hope. The galaxy turned its back on us. Every species closed their doors. Every world rejected us. We were called animals. We were called a plague. We were left to die. Her voice grew soft. But the Lyra didn't turn away. They saw our suffering and they opened their arms. They gave us food when we were hungry. They gave us medicine when we were sick. They gave us dignity when we had forgotten what it meant to be human. She turned back to her crew. "That is a debt we can never fully repay, but today we will try." Felt something stir in his chest. He thought of his colony, of the people he had lost. He thought of the anger he had carried for so long. Now that anger had a direction. Now it had a purpose. Swallowed hard, he was afraid. His hands were shaking. But when he looked at the faces around him, he saw no fear. He saw determination. He saw fire. The fleet moved through space like a river of steel. Word spread to other species, other worlds. They were mobilizing. The humans were going to war. And across the galaxy, people began to wonder. Why? Why would the most feared species in the universe risk everything for a peaceful race with no military value? Why would they sacrifice their lives for strangers? The answer was simple. The answer was human. Because someone had shown them kindness once. And humans never forget. The journey to Solace Prime would take 12 days. 12 days of preparation. 12 days of waiting. 12 days for the galaxy to watch and wonder. Ambassador stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, facing representatives from 100 different species. She was 55 years old, with short gray hair and a face that showed no emotion. Her legs were made of metal, replacement parts given to her after an attack had taken the originals. She walked with a slight limp, but her voice was strong. "We are asking for your help," she said. "The Lyra are being slaughtered. Their cities are burning. Their children are dying. We cannot stand by and watch." The chamber was silent. The representatives looked at each other with nervous eyes. Finally, one of them spoke. He was tall and thin, with blue skin and 4 arms. His species controlled the largest trade network in the galaxy. "The Lyra have no resources worth saving," he said. "They have no military strength. They have no strategic value. Why should we risk our ships for them?" Felt anger rise in her throat, but she kept her voice calm. "You calculate worth in resources and territory," she said. "We calculate it in kindness remembered." She paused. 300 years ago, the Lyra had nothing to gain from helping us. We were broken. We were dying. We had nothing to offer, but they helped us anyway. They helped us because it was the right thing to do. The blue-skinned representative shook his head. "Sentiment is not strategy. They are too powerful. If we attack them, they will destroy us." "Then you are cowards," said simply. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Representatives called for her to be removed, to be punished for her disrespect, but stood firm. She had faced worse than angry politicians. She had faced death. "Call us what you wish," she said when the noise died down. "But humanity will fight. We will fight alone if we must. And when the Lyra are saved, when this war is over, the galaxy will remember who stood with us and who hid behind their walls." She turned and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a heavy sound. On the fleet's largest ship, General was preparing his ground forces. He was a massive man, over 2 meters tall, with shoulders like mountains and hands that could crush stone. But his voice was soft, almost gentle. He spoke to his soldiers like they were his own children. "Many of you will not come home," he said, standing before thousands of troops. "I will not lie to you, they are brutal enemies, they show no mercy, they take no prisoners." He paused. "But we are not fighting for victory, we are fighting for something more important. We are fighting for honor, we are fighting for the people who saved us when we had nothing." A young soldier raised her hand. Her name was, and she was a sergeant with 10 years of experience. Her face was hard, marked by old wounds. "General," she said, "what if we fail? What if we're not strong enough?" Looked at her with kind eyes. "Then we fail standing up, we fail fighting, we fail doing the right thing." He smiled softly. "There is no shame in that." In the medical bay, Doctor was preparing for the wounded. She had set up hundreds of beds, gathered thousands of supplies. She knew what was coming. She had seen war before. She worked through the night, organizing medicine and checking equipment. Her assistants moved around her like shadows, following her orders without question. She was tired. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she did not stop. "Doctor," one of her assistants said, "you should rest." Shook her head. "There will be time to rest when this is over. Right now, people need me." Meanwhile, the young pilot was in the flight deck, staring at his fighter ship. It was small and fast, designed for quick attacks and quick escapes. He had trained for years to fly it, but training was different from real battle. His hands were shaking. "First time is always the hardest," a voice said behind him. He turned to see another pilot, a woman named. She was 28, with short hair and a crooked smile. She had been flying combat missions for 6 years. She was reckless, fearless, and slightly crazy. Everyone knew her reputation. "How do you do it?" asked. "How do you not feel afraid?" Laughed softly. "Who said I'm not afraid?" She sat down beside him. "Fear is normal, fear keeps you alive. The trick is not letting it control you." She pulled out a small photograph from her pocket. It showed 2 young children, a boy and a girl, smiling at the camera. "My younger brother and sister," she explained. "They live on a colony near the outer rim. Every time I fly, I think about them. I think about keeping them safe." She looked at. "Find something worth fighting for, something bigger than yourself. Fear becomes smaller when you have a reason to be brave." Nodded slowly. He thought about the stories he had heard growing up. Stories about the Lyra, about their kindness, about the refuge they had given his ancestors. He thought about what it would mean if the galaxy lost such gentle souls. "Okay," he said quietly, "I think I understand." The fleet continued its journey. As they traveled, they encountered scout ships. The battles were short and violent. Human weapons tore through enemy hulls like paper. Human pilots fought with a fury that shocked even their allies. After one such battle, sat alone in the flight deck, his hands still trembling. He had killed for the first time. He had watched an enemy ship explode, knowing that living creatures were inside. He felt sick. Found him there, sitting in the dark. "I remember my first kill," said, sitting down beside him. "I was 24. A raider was attacking a civilian transport. I shot him down without thinking." He paused. "I cried for 3 days afterward." Looked at him. "Does it get easier?" Was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "It shouldn't get easier. The day it stops hurting is the day you lose something important." He put a hand on shoulder. "But you can learn to carry it. You can learn to use the pain to remind yourself why you fight." Wiped his eyes. "I don't want to be a killer." "You're not a killer," said firmly. "You're a protector. There's a difference. Killers take lives for pleasure. Protectors take lives to save others. It's ugly work. It's painful work, but someone has to do it." The days passed. The fleet grew closer to Solace Prime. Tension filled every ship like a heavy fog. And then on the 12th day they arrived. Was on the bridge when the planet came into view. What he saw made his heart stop. Solace Prime was burning. Fires covered the surface like open wounds. Black smoke rose into the atmosphere. Warships filled the sky, hundreds of them, blocking out the stars like a swarm of insects. Captain stood at the window, her face hard as stone. "All hands," she said, her voice calm and cold. "Battle stations." The war had begun. The sky above Solace Prime was filled with death. Human ships poured into the battle zone like an angry flood. Lasers cut through the darkness. Missiles screamed toward their targets. Explosions lit up the void in orange and white. On the bridge of the Ember of Soul, Captain watched the chaos unfold. Her hands gripped the railing until her knuckles turned white. Around her, officers shouted orders and read reports. The noise was overwhelming. "Enemy ships at 300 kilometers," called out. "They're moving to intercept." "Hold formation," commanded. "Wait for my signal." The fleet was massive. Their ships were ugly things, covered in spikes and dark metal, built for one purpose only: destruction. They outnumbered the human fleet 3-1. By any reasonable calculation, the humans should retreat. They should run. But humans were not reasonable creatures. Now said. The fleet attacked. Commander led the first wave. He was captain of the destroyer's Fury, a man of 60 with a bald head and a thick beard. He had been fighting for 30 years. His ship was old but strong from 100 battles. "All weapons fire," he ordered. "Target their command ship." This Fury charged forward, guns blazing. Other destroyers followed, forming a spear of steel aimed at the heart of the formation. Enemy fire hit them from all sides. Shields flickered. Hulls cracked, but they kept moving. On ship, alarms screamed. A damage report flashed on screen. Engines failing, shields at 20%, hull breach on deck 7. "Sir," his first officer said, voice shaking, "we can't take much more." Looked at the screen. Ahead of them, he saw a human troop transport trying to reach the planet's surface. It was filled with soldiers who would save Lyra lives. Behind him, fighters were moving to intercept it. He made his choice. "Turn us around," he said calmly. "Put us between that transport and the enemy." "Sir, if we do that—" "I know," smiled softly, "I know." This Fury turned. It placed itself directly in the path of the fighters. The enemy weapons tore into its hull like wolves tearing at flesh. Fire spread through the corridors. The ship began to break apart. Opened a channel to the fleet. "Tell my daughter I died standing," he said. Then the ship exploded. The transport escaped. 300 soldiers survived because of one man's sacrifice. Across the fleet, people watched in silence. Then they fought harder. Down on the planet's surface, Sergeant led the first ground assault. Her screamed through the burning atmosphere, shaking so hard she could barely stay in her seat. Around her, 40 soldiers gripped their weapons and prayed. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Looked at her team. They were young, most of them, fresh faces, scared eyes, but their hands were steady. "Listen up," she shouted over the noise. "When we hit the ground, we move fast. We find survivors. We get them to safety. We do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not leave anyone behind." The ship landed hard. The doors opened. Heat and smoke poured in. Was the first one out. The city was destroyed. Buildings had been reduced to rubble. Streets were covered in ash and broken glass. Bodies lay everywhere, Lyra bodies, pale and still, their 3 hearts forever silent. But there were survivors too. Saw them emerging from collapsed buildings, from underground shelters, from anywhere they could hide. They looked at the human soldiers with wide eyes, not understanding. An elderly Lyra approached. He was thin and fragile, his translucent skin showing bruises beneath. His eyes were wet with tears. "You came," he whispered. "You actually came." Took his hand. "Of course we came. We're humans, we remember." Across the city, similar scenes played out. Human soldiers carried wounded Lyra to safety. They shared their water, their food, their medical supplies. They stood guard while Lyra families escaped to evacuation zones. In the sky above, the battle continued. Bora's cascade bombs tore through formations. The weapons were terrifying. One explosion would trigger another, then another, spreading destruction like a wildfire. Entire squadrons of enemy ships vanished in seconds. Flew through the chaos like a dancer. Her fighter ship spun and rolled, avoiding enemy fire, dealing death with every pass. She was laughing, not from joy, but from the madness of battle. It was the only way she could stay sane. Flew beside her, trying to keep up. His hands were sweating inside his gloves. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the engines. But he kept flying. He kept fighting. "On your left," shouted over the radio. Turned just in time to see a fighter coming straight at him. He fired without thinking. The enemy ship exploded. "Good shot," said. "You're learning." On the ground, General arrived with the main force. Thousands of soldiers poured from their ships, spreading across the burning city. They set up defensive positions, medical stations, evacuation centers. They worked with silent efficiency, like a machine built for one purpose: saving lives. Walked through the destruction, his massive frame moving carefully around the wounded. He stopped beside a group of Lyra children huddled in a shelter. They looked up at him with terrified eyes. He knelt down, making himself small. He spoke softly. "Don't be afraid," he said. "We're here to help you. No one will hurt you anymore." One of the children, a small girl with 3 beating hearts visible through her chest, reached out and touched his hand. "Are you the humans?" she asked. "From the old stories?" Nodded. "Yes, we're the humans." "My grandmother said you would come," the girl whispered. "She said you always keep your promises." Felt tears forming in his eyes. He blinked them away. "Your grandmother was right," he said. Elder had been preparing to die. The last surviving member of the Lyra High Council, he had recorded his final message hours ago, a farewell to his people, a goodbye to a galaxy that had forgotten them. But now he stood at his window, watching human ships fill the sky, watching human soldiers fight and die for his people. He could not believe it. He opened a new broadcast channel. His voice went out across the galaxy, to every species, every world. "This is Elder of Solace Prime," he said, his voice shaking. "I speak to all who can hear. They have come. The humans have come. They are dying for us. They are giving their lives for strangers." He paused, tears running down his pale cheeks. 300 years ago we gave them shelter. We gave them hope. We thought it was a small thing, but they never forgot. They never forgot." He looked at the battle raging above. "Remember this day," he said. "Remember what true strength looks like. It is not weapons. It is not power. It is kindness returned." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings sat in silence, watching, wondering. The battle was far from over, but something had changed. Something important. The battle had lasted 3 days. 3 days of fire and blood. 3 days of screaming engines and dying soldiers. 3 days that would change the galaxy forever. On every planet with a communication array, people watched. They saw human ships burning in the darkness of space. They saw human soldiers carrying Lyra children through ruined streets. They saw something they had never expected to see, the showing mercy. Merchant was not a soldier. She was a civilian trader, 40 years old, with a small cargo ship and a crew of 12. She had been delivering supplies to a colony near the outer rim when the news reached her. The humans were fighting for the Lyra, and they were losing. Looked at her crew. They were not warriors. They had no weapons, no combat training, but they had a ship. They had supplies. They had courage. "We're going to Solace Prime," she announced. Her first officer stared at her. "That's a war zone. We'll be killed." "Maybe," admitted. "But those soldiers need food. They need medicine. They need water." She paused. "And I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror tomorrow." She sent out a call to other civilian ships. To her surprise, dozens responded. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, even a few luxury yachts, all filled with supplies, all heading toward the battle. They called themselves the Mercy Fleet. On the planet's surface, Colonel led a special forces team behind enemy lines. They were the best soldiers humanity had. Silent, deadly, unstoppable. Their mission was to destroy supply stations, to cut off the enemy's resources. Was a thin man with cold eyes and quick hands. He never spoke more than necessary. He never wasted movement. He was the perfect weapon. But even perfect weapons have hearts. During one mission, his team discovered a Lyra hospital that they had marked for destruction. Hundreds of patients lay inside, too sick or wounded to move. The enemy was coming. There was no time to evacuate. Military logic said to leave them. The mission was more important. One hospital was not worth risking the entire operation. Looked at his soldiers, then he looked at the hospital. "Change of plans," he said. "We're staying." His team set up defensive positions around the building. They held off attacks for 18 hours. When reinforcements finally arrived, only half of his team was still alive. But every patient in that hospital survived. In the medical bay of the Ember of Soul, Medic had not slept in 4 days. Her hands were stained with blood. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she kept working. Wounded soldiers filled every bed. Some were human, some were Lyra, treated them all the same. A young Lyra boy lay on one of the tables. A piece of metal had pierced his chest, just missing his 3 hearts. He looked up with frightened eyes. "Am I going to die?" he whispered. Smiled gently and took his hand. "Not today," she said. "I won't let you." She worked for 3 hours to save him. When she finished, her legs gave out and she collapsed beside the bed. One of her assistants tried to help her up. "Doctor, you need to rest." Shook her head. "There are more patients coming. I'll rest when they're safe." In the command ship, Warlord watched the battle unfold. He was a massive creature, covered in thick scales and old scars. He had conquered 100 worlds. He had destroyed 1,000 armies. He had never known defeat. But something was wrong. His fleet outnumbered the humans. His weapons were superior. By every calculation, he should have won this battle in hours. Instead, it had dragged on for days. Instead, his soldiers were dying faster than the enemy. The humans fought like demons. They took wounds that should have killed them and kept fighting. They threw themselves onto grenades to save their comrades. They crashed damaged ships into enemy vessels rather than surrender. "What are they?" one of his officers asked, fear in his voice. Did not answer. He had heard stories about he had thought they were exaggerations. He had been wrong. These creatures were not fighting for territory. They were not fighting for resources. They were fighting for something he could not understand. And that made them more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. The turning point came on the 4th day. A convoy of medical ships arrived from the system. They were a peaceful species, known for their healing arts. They had watched the battle from afar, debating whether to get involved. "We cannot sit by and watch innocents die," their leader had said. "The humans are showing us what courage looks like. We must answer." Behind them came others. Warriors from the system, another species, almost as feared as humans, sent volunteer fighters. Though a race of engineers sent repair ships to fix damaged vessels. The Galactic Council remained officially silent, but individual nations began to act. Ships arrived from a dozen different species. Supplies poured in. The Mercy Fleet reached the battle zone and began distributing food and medicine. The tide was turning. In the middle of the chaos, fighter was hit. The impact threw him against his seat, cracking 2 ribs. Warning lights flashed everywhere. His engines were failing. He was going down. His voice crackled over the radio. "Eject, get out of there." Tried, but his ejection system was damaged. He was trapped. Saw his ship falling toward the planet's surface, trailing smoke and fire. She made a decision in less than a second. She dove after him. Her fighter screamed through the atmosphere, pushing past its limits. She came up beside his falling ship and did something insane. She used her own ship to push his away from a collision course with a mountain. The impact sent both ships spinning. His fighter broke apart. She ejected at the last possible moment, her body tumbling through the burning air. They both crashed in a field outside the city. Crawled from his wreckage to find lying in the grass, her leg twisted at a wrong angle, blood covering her face. But she was alive. "You're crazy," said, kneeling beside her. Laughed weakly. "I know, but you owe me a drink now." Rescue ships found them an hour later. Would spend weeks in the medical bay, but she would fly again. Stayed by her side the entire time. On the 5th day, they began to retreat. It was not a full withdrawal, not yet, but had seen enough. His fleet was bleeding. His soldiers were terrified. They had shown him something he had never expected. They had shown him that some battles cannot be won with weapons alone. As the ships pulled back, Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship watching them go. She was exhausted. She had lost friends, colleagues, entire crews. The cost had been terrible. But they had held the line. Captain's voice came over the communication channel. "Admiral, should we pursue?" Was quiet for a long moment. The warrior in her wanted revenge. The warrior in her wanted to destroy every ship, to make them pay for every life they had taken. But that was not why they had come. "No," she said finally, "let them go. We came to protect, not to conquer. The Lyra are safe. That's enough." Across the fleet, soldiers lowered their weapons. The battle was over. And across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in wonder. They had won. But more than that, they had shown mercy. Everything was about to change. The silence after battle is a strange thing. It is not peaceful. It is heavy, filled with the echoes of everything that has been lost. Captain walked through the ruins of a Lyra city. The fires had been put out, but smoke still hung in the air. Broken buildings stretched in every direction like wounded giants. The ground was covered in ash and glass. She walked alone. She needed to see this. She needed to remember. Thousands of her people had died in this battle. Thousands more were wounded. The fleet had lost over a third of its ships. Commander was gone. So many others were gone. Had it been worth it? An elderly Lyra appeared from behind a collapsed wall. He was thin and bent, his pale skin covered in dust. He walked slowly toward, his 3 hearts beating visibly in his chest. She stopped and waited for him. When he reached her, he took her hand in both of his. His grip was weak but gentle. "You came," he said simply, his voice cracked with emotion. "When everyone else abandoned us, you came." Did not know what to say. She was not good with words. She was a soldier, trained for war, not for moments like this. "We had to," she finally managed. "You saved us once, it was our turn." The old Lyra smiled. Tears ran down his translucent cheeks. "We gave you so little," he whispered. "Just food, just shelter, just kindness." Shook her head. "You gave us everything. You gave us hope when we had none. You treated us like family when the galaxy called us monsters." She paused. "That is not a small thing. That is the biggest thing anyone has ever given us." The old Lyra squeezed her hand. "Then the debt is paid." Looked at the sky, where human ships still patrolled, protecting the planet that had once protected them. "There is no debt," she said. "There is only family." A week later, a memorial was built in the center of the city. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone, polished smooth, carved with names. Human names on one side, Lyra symbols on the other, together forever. General stood before the memorial, reading the names of his fallen soldiers. He knew each one. He had written letters to their families. He had cried for them in private. Now he stood in the sunlight, his massive shoulders bent with grief. A small hand tugged at his uniform. He looked down to see a Lyra child. the same girl he had comforted in the shelter. She held a single flower, pale blue with petals like silk. "This is for them," she said, holding up the flower. "My mother says it's what we give to heroes." Knelt down and accepted the flower. His eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said softly. The girl smiled. "My name is Sora. It's a human word. It means sky." Looked at her surprised. "Your parents named you with a human word." Sora nodded proudly. "They said humans gave us back the sky, so they gave me the sky as a name." Had no words. He simply hugged her, this small Lyra child with a human name, and let his tears fall. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador stood before the assembled representatives once again. But this time, the mood was different. The species that had called her a fool now looked at her with something new in their eyes. Respect, perhaps even shame. "The battle is over," announced. "The Lyra are safe. They have withdrawn." She paused. "Many of you said we were foolish to fight this war. Many of you said the Lyra had no strategic value, no resources worth saving. Many of you calculated the cost and found it too high." She looked around the chamber, meeting every pair of eyes. "We calculated differently. We calculated in lives saved, in kindness returned, in promises kept." She stood. "The humans lost 12,000 soldiers in this battle, 12,000 sons and daughters who will never come home. We lost a third of our fleet. We paid a price that cannot be measured in currency." Her voice grew stronger. "But we would pay it again, 100 times, 1,000 times, because that is who we are. We are humans. We remember those who helped us. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We do not abandon our friends." The chamber was silent. Finally, the blue-skinned representative who had opposed her before rose to speak. "The council has voted," he said, his voice subdued. "The collective is formally censured for their attack on Solace Prime. Economic sanctions will be implemented. Military restrictions will be enforced." He paused. "And the humans, are formally recognized as heroes of the galactic community." Felt a small smile cross her face. "We did not come for titles." "We know," the representative said. "That is why you deserve them." Years passed, the galaxy changed. The story of Solace Prime spread to every corner of known space. Children of 100 species grew up hearing about the who had sacrificed everything for strangers. The word human took on a new meaning, no longer just a species but a concept, an ideal. To be human meant to remember. To be human meant to repay kindness with loyalty. To be human meant to stand up for those who could not stand for themselves. On Solace Prime, life slowly returned to normal. Cities were rebuilt. Gardens grew again. The Lyra continued their gentle way of living, healing the wounded, creating art, raising their children. But now human and Lyra lived side by side. Some humans stayed after the war, choosing to make this world their home. Some Lyra traveled to human worlds, curious about the species that had saved them. Marriages happened. Children were born, some with 3 hearts, some with 1. Elder lived for another 15 years. He spent his final days writing the history of what had happened, making sure it would never be forgotten. In his last entry he wrote, "The humans call themselves because they come from a harsh planet that tried to kill them, but I have seen the truth. They are not creatures of death. They are creatures of fire, bright, warm, dangerous, and beautiful. And like fire, their kindness spreads. Touch one human with compassion and they will carry that flame forever. They will pass it to their children and their children's children. They will wait for the moment when they can return it." He paused, his old hands trembling. That is what happened at Solace Prime. 300 years ago, we lit a small fire in the darkness. We thought nothing of it. It was simply the right thing to do. But the humans never let that fire die. They carried it across generations, across centuries, across the stars. And when we needed it most, they brought it back to us. He set down his pen. "The galaxy calls them many things, warriors, monsters, heroes, but I know the truth. They are simply family, and family never forgets. Young Sora grew up hearing these stories. She became a teacher, sharing the history of her people with the next generation. One day, a young Lyra student asked her why the humans had come. Sora smiled, a smile she had learned from General, from Captain, from all the humans who had become part of her life. Because long ago, she said, when they had nothing, we gave them everything we could spare, and they never forgot. The galaxy learned something that day: mercy is never wasted on humans. They carry it like fire, and when the time comes, they return it 1,000-fold. The student thought about this. Are humans good or dangerous? Sora laughed softly. Both. That is what makes them human. Outside the classroom window, human and Lyra children played together in the garden. Their laughter rose into the sky that had once been filled with war, now filled only with light. The galaxy still called them, but now the name carried a different weight. Not just fear, hope,